Well, we're joined by Alex Vatanka for more insight, Senior Fellow from the Middle East Institute, and he's in Washington, D.C. It's good to see you, Alex. Thank you for joining us. So President Trump says that Iran reached out to negotiate, but it's also saying that it's prepared for war. So tell us, what's Tehran's game here?
Oh, I don't think the Iranian regime wants war with the United States. That's just a sort of rhetoric that we should expect from the Islamic Republic. And I think this sort of sudden push for a new round of diplomacy by Tehran, I haven't heard Iranian officials kind of come out and admit that they're willing to meet the expectations of this American president, which in the case of the nuclear issue, it's about zero enrichment in Iran. We haven't heard the Iranians say that, which basically leaves the door open for, yes, diplomacy can restart, but it might take days and weeks. What happens in between is that the protesters might lose hope that the U.S. is on their side. And at the end of the process, the Iranians will not give Trump what he wants, which is zero enrichment. So I think that's what those people in the Trump administration who are pushing for a harder line are going to warn him and say Iran is buying time here.
Okay, speaking of hard line, Mr. Trump just announced a 25% tariff on any country doing business with Iran. With that threat now on the table, if the talks were to happen, what can come out of that meeting? And what could Tehran offer a transactional president like Mr. Trump?
Look, if the talks are successful from the American point of view, which is Iran stops enriching uranium, then those sanctions were going to go away anyways. So what I think the president has done here with in the last few hours announcing these 25% of tariffs, it's really trying reassure those people who are expecting him to take a tougher line on Iran that he's on it, that he hasn't forgotten. But, in reality, we have to expect that sanctions alone is not going to change Iran's behavior. Iran's largest trading partner happens to be China. 90% of Iran's oil go to China. China is already facing 30 to 40% tariff rate. The big question mark, and we don't know the answer to that, is will that 25% be baked into the already existing tariffs on China or not? The Chinese obviously have their own reasons to want to make sure this Islamic Republic survives. So a lot of questions, but I doubt very much economic sanctions at this point alone is going to be a game changer. What people are watching out for is more, I guess, muscular American reaction to what they're seeing happen inside of Iran.
Let's talk about domestically. How do you interpret Mr. Pezeshkian's latest attempts to calm tensions at home? How is his appeal going down with protesters, young and old, who may want different things in their dissent, Alex?
Mr. Pezeshkian came to office in Iran's hugely limited elections. I mean, they don't have free elections in Iran. He was handpicked in many ways by Khamenei, the supreme leader. He was allowed to run a campaign that said everything's broken. He basically has said that repeatedly in his time in office. Iran has stopped functioning as a healthy state. A long time ago, he said, we have problems everywhere. So you have to just listen to Pezeshkian. Everything's broken. And that's exactly what the protesters are saying. Everything's broken. We need an entire new system of governance. But obviously, that's where Pezeshkian jumps off. One thing is to promise reform and keep the people, if you will, somewhat, not pleased, but keep him in the sense of bring him with you without giving him change. And now, the protesters are obviously showing very clearly that they're not going to buy into any of this anymore. And Pezeshkian been in the streets. I don't know. I mean, history, I don't think will judge him well for this, because here's a moment, not just for Pezeshkian, for so many others in the Iranian regime, to actually stand up and say, yes, we hear you. And Mr. Khamenei, who's been the supreme leader since 1989, he is guilty for what we have in Iran today. And therefore, I'm willing to part ways with the supreme leader. He hasn't done that. He's been a good team player. Again, they might be able to contain this latest round of protests, but I can almost guarantee, even if they do, the next round of protests are just around the corner.
Okay, before we let you go, Alex, Reza Pahlavi and other exiled figures are increasingly visible now. How much influence do they actually have inside Iran? And even if the current system were to fall suddenly, is there a credible leader or a political force that can govern Iran better?
Look, we can have a long discussion about Reza Pahlavi, the man or the political operator. Is he a good organizer? A lot of ways you can judge him. But here's what I do know, and I don't want to be a sort of advocate for him. That's not my job. I'm an analyst. I look at it objectively. When I look at the landscape, I don't see anybody else with a name recognition that could offer themselves not as the future king or ruler of Iran, but as a manager that can take Iran from the crisis they're in right now and take the country through a transition to something much better at the end of the tunnel. He's saying he can do that. A lot of people think he can. A lot of people are doubtful. That's his challenge. Can he bring a maximum number of people in the opposition outside, but far more importantly, start actually connecting with people inside of Iran? We're hearing them chant their names, but it needs to be much more than that. He needs to prove that he can actually peel off from the regime. We need defections. If you get defections from the regime, that's when things could really go south for this Islamic Republic.
Okay, Alex, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much for your analysis. Alex Vatanka, Senior Fellow at the Middle East Institute.